We are back on YouTube, but we are not really back into War Thunder because I did run the War Thunder thing. I've done it for a while and I stopped doing it and I got rid of the channel because I thought it was time to move on to do something else. And I have grown rather unhappy with the direction the game has taken, to the extent that I don't want to be involved in any of the marketing for it. And if you make War Thunder content, you're doing marketing. You're doing a form of soft marketing for the company that makes the game. Even things as simple as stuff like tutorials, stuff like how to play the game, just showing like where the fun can still be had in the game. Like all that does is it just keeps people involved in the War Thunder community, and the community's like pretty good, but the gameplay itself, for me, over probably around the past year, most recently about 6 months ago, has become so convoluted and so without purpose, without vision, that I no longer enjoy it. Um, I've had multiple different video ideas that completely died on the vine because I can't get the gameplay to match up, and I can't do gameplay anymore where I feel any passion about what's going on. And the reason that is because War Thunder is a free to play game, and the problem with free to play games is that the gameplay itself is only there as a centerpiece in order to graft on all of the monetization schemes and pressures, where the gameplay itself is just a host for the stuff that actually makes money. And the way that a lot of these principles work are basically trying to break your brain and frustrate you to the extent that you will end up spending more money on a free-to-play game than you would on a fully developed game. Like War Thunder's gameplay hasn't really changed for 10 years. It's effectively been in beta testing. The core air realistic battles mode is effectively a pseudo team deathmatch with objectives on different maps that don't really mesh together. They don't really build into each other. There's no vision for it. Games are just kind of won and lost almost at random now, and as the reward cycle has become the main driving factor of the gameplay, the actual player base has been incentivized to play in ways that are counterintuitive as far as quality gameplay goes, as far as enjoyable gameplay goes. And it's really just, at this point, it's just a speed run to get to the advertised portion of the game. And all of the advertising for the game is centered around what's called the top tier experience. What's basically your MiG-29, your F-16, your F-14, your Top Gun experience. That's like the driving factor for the game, and it means everything that's in between that is just an obstacle for players to get through as quickly as possible, and in getting through it as quickly as possible, there's no incentive to learn the game. There's no incentive to actually really try to win anymore because, like, over the past few years, the grind has become longer, the rewards have gone down, and even things like rewards for winning the match just effectively don't exist anymore. It means that the gameplay style has shifted between, when I first started, it was two teams opposed to each other, and they would try to work against each other, and you still had like a lot of that grinding aspect where people did things just to grind, because the way the Silver Lions economy is structured is basically an average player is going to lose SL in one game mode, and they're going to have to shift over to another one to make SL to go back to the other game mode in order to play it. As it's an artificial barrier imposed to limit the amount of time that you can play the game without spending money on it, basically. And it's not good for gameplay. And the gameplay itself has deteriorated, and it has significantly deteriorated as more and more premium planes are added into the game, and as that drive becomes more and more, that, yeah, cool, I can show you how to get a 5-kill game in the N1K. I can show you how to get a 7-kill game. I did this last night. I repeated the same thing I did. I was like, hey, maybe I'll come back to this. I'll drink some beers and see if this is fun again after. Basically, I switched to simulator battles, and simulator battles it's different, I was learning some things, but I don't think that game mode's really any better, and I don't think it has none of the problems that AirRB does. So effectively what it means is most of the content that I could make and most of the content that I enjoyed making, like, it's just not as insightful anymore because there's not really any insights to give them to the game. Um, for instance, like the propeller-driven BRs that I like to play they're no longer as fun as they used to be because things like JU288s, A1Hs, the fact that like teams don't climb anymore means that if you take almost any kind of plane in the game and you just kind of get to 4 kilometers, you're just kind of set up for 3 to 4 easy kills. The N1K is by definition not a good plane. It's not very fast. It doesn't climb all that well. Its only real merit is it's pretty decent in the turn and it has a lot of ammo. In reality, in these 6-0 to 7-0 games, I shouldn't be averaging 3 kills per battle, but looking at 13 games and doing the math, I averaged 2.93 player kills per battle in a plane that is extremely over-tiered, a plane that's not good, and it should struggle, but it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't struggle is because the gameplay is about the grind now. Everything's transitory. And because everything's transitory, it means that the game has become effectively structured around grinding. And that's bad. I think the best example of the way that the game has become structured around the grind and how we've been kind of slow walked into a game that is just much worse than it used to be is really looking at that tier 6 battle rating range, looking at the planes that are there now compared to the planes that were there 2.5 years ago and the planes that we were concerned about. 2.5 years ago, we were concerned about the Lightning F6 moving from 10.0 down to 9.7. And the reason that people were concerned about it was because that plane did not fit in that battle rating range in a way that was fun to play, and it didn't fit in a way that was fun to play against. The Lightning F6 was supersonic, good acceleration, bad handling, and 2 good missiles. And the missiles were good enough that they were effectively free kills. And people rightfully said, hey, this is bad for gameplay. Moving this plane down is going to make everything else around it worse. It's going to take games that were not perfectly balanced, but they were somewhat competitive, like MiG-17, F-86 Sabre, and G-91 are all pretty decent planes for the time, and they all had ways that they could play against each other, where it came down to whether or not you were going to win was kind of like based on cumulative player skill. Like, you could reasonably play against a good MiG-17 player if you were a reasonably decent G-91 player. Now, you wouldn't always win. The MiG-17 was, for all intents and purposes, I'd say it's a better plane. But there was some counterplay for the most part, and it was interesting. Now we fast forward to today, and you look at that battle rating range, and it's filled with planes that are just like the Lightning F6, where there is no counterplay against them, and the counterplay that does exist is incredibly uninteresting. It's incredibly contrived. It's been compressed to the point where effectively no matter what plane you're flying, if you get an up tier, you're probably going to get slapped, and if you get a down tier, you're going to be able to slap the shit out of everyone, where your skill level effectively doesn't matter as much. I think like the Harrier GR1 is a very good example of a plane that if it gets a down tier, down to 9.0, or God forbid when it was 9.7 and it got all the way down to 8.7, or when it was 9.3 and it got down to 8.3, that plane had no nuance to it. You fly the plane straight, you get within 1 kilometer of someone without flares, you click a button, and you win. If you get an up tier in that plane, if you get stuck at an 11.0 game, someone else clicks on a button, and you lose. That's the dichotomy of it. That's the thing. That's how the game is balanced around the grind. So now we have a bunch of planes that really don't fit anywhere. There's no interesting meta where like you could have a potentially interesting meta of like your better than like early generation subsonic planes. Like you could have like your F-86s and your Hunter GR1s, and maybe like up to your Lightning, like the Lightning would be at the top end of that. You could create something that's interesting and something that's balanced. But if it was balanced, it means that skill would matter, and that's not the intention. That's not the intention of structuring the game around the grind. The intention of structuring the game around the grind, the intention of adding these planes, is that by making things compressed, it means those moments of like dramatic victory and dramatic defeat are accessible to everyone. It means that if you downloaded the game a week ago, you can get a 3 to 4 kill game, depending on just where your plane is in the matchmaking. I think planes like the A60 Tram, the Harrier GR1 was introduced, the A10 early, the SU-25K. I think they draw a clear distinction from what was previously in the game as far as premiums go. Previously, when I started playing jets, the G91R4 was a very common thing. You could buy it. It was a reasonably decent plane, but it was nothing really dramatically different than what was in the tech tree. And the missiles that it came with were not enough to make someone that was brand new at the game consistently get kills, and the battle ratings weren't compressed enough where you could consistently get kills as a brand new player. Planes like the A60 Tram have no learning curve to them. There's nothing that you need to know to really get the most out of it. As long as you can recognize a missile aspect in a range, you will consistently get kills in that. That is a very wide departure from the game that I started and the game that, like, the parts of the game that I like. And as the game has matured and as this style of gameplay has become more prevalent, where we are reducing the learning curve to effectively nothing into like a random chance game of more or less rock, paper, scissors, the gameplay for me has deteriorated to the point that I don't find it redeemable anymore. I don't enjoy playing jets that I used to. My game has been structured around what do I want to avoid instead of what do I want to do. And I think the mental leap from deciding to play something based on its own merit to deciding to play something based on what you can avoid is incredibly important. It's the factor for me that takes the game from being good but flawed to just being bad. And the reason that it makes this bad, just aside from me complaining about gameplay, is other players experience the same pressures I do, but they don't have the same level of experience that I do, so they don't have the ability to really navigate these battle rating ranges anymore. And the gameplay itself is incredibly convoluted. Like, if you look at some videos of like the 9.3 range, like people are saying, oh yeah, take rockets so you can use them as pseudo flares, because that's what the game has become, and that's rather ridiculous. Like, yeah, I can still go out and probably do reasonably well in the F2 Saber, but the reason that I can do well in the F2 Saber is because I got to enjoy the benefit of a meta that was not as nearly power crept as this. And there has to be a point where people go, enough is enough. We're not going to promote this. We're not going to play it. We're going to go find something else. This is not worth our time and not worth our money. And there's a lot of stuff that you can look at in the game and you can rationalize it away, of like looking at the time that you spent playing the game versus the money you spent. You'll usually come out with like a pretty good returns ratio, but that comes with a lot of caveats. That comes with the opportunity cost that you missed out on potentially enjoying other games, of exploring other genres, of going outside and touching grass. And I don't think anyone really wants to lead that charge, let alone any kind of War Thunder content creator, because most War Thunder content creators, the only content that they produce is War Thunder stuff. And to take the steps to branch out to other video games, especially trying to speak about something as like a subject matter expert on something, is difficult. It takes a long time to invest in order to become very proficient at this game, and it's hard to leave it behind because it's always there, it's always persistent, it's always easy to come back to this. I could very easily start making Beer Thunder videos again and pump out one a week without an issue. I could turn my brain off and do it. I could be like, hey, here's my Patreon, give me beer money, I will play this game for you, and you will be entertained. But that comes at a cost. And it's a cost that I don't want to pay anymore. So, getting rid of my channel and all of my previous War Thunder content was basically a way to make it a lot harder for me to come back to it. Because I don't want to come back to it. I don't find the gameplay redeeming enough and palatable enough that I would encourage newer players to stick with it. The road that I walked down no longer exists anymore. The game is fundamentally different, and it's different in ways that have made it worse. And I don't want to be stuck in that boat where I am playing War Thunder for the sole purpose of producing content about War Thunder because it's the only thing that I feel that I know. I'm going to do commentary. I like doing commentary. I am going to commentate on different things that are not this video game. And I'm not saying that you should quit playing the game. If you enjoy the game, legitimately enjoy it, keep playing it. It's fine. It doesn't make you a bad person. If you're like a content creator, I'm not saying you shouldn't make content. If you enjoy that cycle, keep doing it, but also try to be aware if you ever cross over that point, like you don't enjoy the game, because if you don't enjoy the game, then I don't think it's worth promoting. And I would also say that, like, if you're a content creator, like, be careful about the types of content that you produce, because the content that you do produce has the effect of marketing the game. If you are a larger content creator and you have the discount code and your bit is reviewing planes as they come out, if you have a problem with $70 premium planes and the way that you add it to the game, maybe take a moment and say, hey, I'm not going to review these planes. I will take the hit on viewership because I think they are fundamentally not good for the game. Because even if you make a review where you don't recommend something explicitly, people still reach the conclusion on whether or not to buy something based on what you tell them. You can say that the A6 tram is not really worth $70, but then when you back it up with, well, it's actually pretty good for grinding, people are going to buy that plane based on whether or not it's good for grinding. And then if they use your discount code, that is attaching your name, that is attaching a sales metric to guide you to quantify exactly how much money you are making and exactly where your viewership will trend in the future as far as marketing goes. And it allows them to refine their formula in order to be more successful, in order to be more profitable. And as the profitability of the game increases, it's been incredibly detrimental to the actual fulfilling nature of the game. This game, to me, is not fulfilling anymore. That's why I'm not going to advertise it, and I'm going to play it a lot less than I used to, and I'm going to play it in methods that are a lot different than before. And then the final thing is, if you're a War Thunder content creator, be cognizant of, like, the learning path that you walk down, and be cognizant of the fact that, like, the pressure that other players feel today is not necessarily the same as yours. Like, if you're able to unlock every single plane right away without grinding it, if you're never in that situation where you're at a Silver Lions deficit because you're just average at the game mode and don't have 10 years of experience doing it, maybe let that knowledge color whether or not you recommend something. And then the final thing is, if you have doubts about the game, start branching out into other things. Like, if you have the talent to commentate on one video game, you can probably find something else you're passionate about to commentate on. I mean, shit. Scottish Koala sucks. And he somehow has a channel that is larger where he gets to be even more wrong about history than he was about War Thunder. It's not that hard. Anyways, that's my thoughts. I'm gonna go back to I'm gonna go touch some grass, or in this case, I'm gonna go touch some snow because that's what I find fun now. I'm on the winter sports arc of the character development path. Anyways, this is like the final Beer Thunder post-mortem episode, so that people can stop throwing rocks at my window and saying, "Come back to the game, you coward!" And like, I don't want to. I don't want to. Maybe I'll play some squad and teach I don't know how to fucking suppress a hillside with a machine gun. I don't know. We'll see what happens.